And we're back on Jersey Central on the new Talk Radio 1450 WCTC, the voice of Central Jersey. Well, as you know, WCTC has been presenting the New Jersey City University Presidential Speaker Series. And the next event is going to be happening on Monday, April 4th at 6:30. Very special location this time around. We're going to be at the Liberty Science Center inside the IMAX Theater. And we're so excited about who our special guest will be that evening. None other than Planetary scientist Dr. Carolyn Porco will be there, and she joins me this morning on the Raritan Bay Medical Center Jersey Newsmaker Hotline to talk about the event. Dr. Porco, welcome to WCTC Radio. How are you?
I'm great, and thank you for having me.
Wow, so excited to have you coming to New Jersey on April 4th at 6:30 for the Presidential Speaker Series. Great to have you on the show this morning. Do you recall, Dr. Porco, when it happened for you, kind of looking up to the sky and saying, there's probably more happening up there than meets the eye? Do you recall what your interest in planetary science sort of began?
Well, it kind of developed. When I was a young teenager, about 13, I was in somewhat of an existential crisis, and I was thinking deep thoughts like, what is the meaning of life? And I looked into religions of all sorts and philosophies and was really on this quest, and all that thinking about, who am I, where am I, what am I doing here, got me finally to the question, well, where is here? And that got me looking into astronomy and what was out there and what was the cosmic backdrop against which my life occurred on planet Earth. And also, I grew up in the 60s, and it was a very spacey decade. We had President Kennedy announcing in the early 60s we were going to make for the moon, which was just an unimaginable thing to say in those days. And it seemed like, everybody's off the leash, and we're going into space. And there was Star Trek, and there was lots of space shows, and then finally there was the Apollo moon landing. And I know that I felt that I was going to have a future somehow related to space. Of course, there was a famous moment when I got up on a friend's roof with a telescope, and she and I first saw Saturn. That also happened when I was a young teenager. So it really kind of developed over time. But by the time I got through high school, I knew that I knew that the university that I wanted to attend was one that had to have an astronomy department, and I was going to be given the opportunity to learn more. And so I went to the State University of New York at Stony Brook, and it was there that I decided I wanted to concentrate on the study of planets, and I ended up going across the country to the California Institute of Technology, which operates the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and that was really a major step, and put me in contact with people studying planets from space probes and so on. So, from there it just kind of unfolded.
Wow, so your future was as unlimited as the universe itself at that time, right?
Well, it felt that way, and that was one of those things about the 1960s. It was just, like I said, it felt like everybody's off the leash and anything is possible. It was an anything is possible decade.
Fantastic. And you had mentioned earlier about when the first time you actually saw Saturn and the rings of Saturn. Your work now is with the imaging science team on the Cassini mission, which is orbiting Saturn. Can you talk about your work with that?
Well, I've been for the last 25 years leading a team that has been ultimately responsible for all those beautiful, magnificent, eye-popping, glorious images of Saturn and its rings and moons that everyone has seen over the last nearly dozen years now. And we started on November 13th, 1990. That's when we all got the phone call saying, okay, you've been chosen. You are the anointed ones.
Wow.
And from here on, your mission is to explore the Saturn system. And the first 7 years, we were designing the camera system, making sure it was built to the proper specifications, as well as paying attention to how the spacecraft itself was built and how we would conduct the mission. And then we launched in October of 1997, and it took us 7 years to get to Saturn, and we successfully got into orbit in the summer of 2004, and we've been orbiting Saturn ever since. And it's been one major exploratory expedition that we have been conducting in the Saturn system, visiting moons and looking at the rings and studying the atmosphere and doing these things over and over and over again, to the point where we have a very intimate knowledge of this incredible, iconic planetary system that is 10 times farther away from us than the sun is. So,
Wow.
Humans have extended their reach and done it with panache and style.
Yeah, were our assumptions of Saturn, Dr. Porco, pretty accurate, or we had to actually go there to see what the truth behind Saturn was?
Well, remember, we had been to Saturn before with first the Pioneer spacecraft, which just flew by, took very rudimentary pictures. That was kind of a taste. It was a proof of concept that we could actually get across the asteroid belt without harm, and we could make it through the planetary systems out there, Jupiter's and Saturn's, without harm, that those were benign enough environments that we could actually send a space probe through. And then right after that, we sent the Voyager mission, and that went to Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. So we knew, we had a good idea of what the Saturn system consisted of, but they were just flybys. There was no time to pause and linger and really go back for multiple looks so you could conduct the experiment the way it should be done. But we could do that with Cassini. Cassini was an orbiter. We have had the leisure to do it the right way. And so we have obviously refined many of our thoughts about the processes that go on in the Saturn system, in the rings, on the moons, in the atmosphere. And in some cases, we verified what we thought, but in many, many cases, it wasn't quite right. And what we've learned really taught us a lot about how those processes go that far away from the sun. And a lot of the processes we see, for example, in the rings are those that occur in the disks of material that surround forming stars and ultimately become solar systems like our own.
Wow.
And also, they're similar to processes that go on in galaxies, which are, 1 trillion times larger than Saturn's rings. So we've been able to examine those kinds of processes that underlie systems of vastly different scale. And it's the kind of cosmic connection that we hope to achieve with missions like Cassini, and we've done it, like I said, in style.
Fascinating. And this is just a small sample of what we're going to be hearing from Dr. Porco on April 4th when she comes to New Jersey for the next installment of the New Jersey City University Presidential Speaker Series. We will be at the beautiful Liberty Science Center IMAX Theater Monday, April 4th at 6:30. Get your tickets. There is a limited number of tickets available, just $25. You can purchase them at njcu.edu/lectures, and you are going to be in for just an amazing, unforgettable evening with Dr. Carolyn Porco. Specifically, Dr. Porco, can you talk a little bit about what your lecture will be about on April 4th at Jersey City?
Well, it's going to be the story of Cassini and what we have learned there. Just a journey through all the beautiful scenes and vistas that we have seen. And I'm going to end on legacy. I'm going to end on perspective and legacy. And hopefully the audience will come away appreciative of just exactly what our explorations of the solar system over the last 55 years have brought to us, and how they have enriched our life, our culture, and our understanding of how we have come to be. So I really look forward to everybody turning up. It's
going to be a great night. You've written over 120 scientific papers. You've been on television like crazy and also consulted in movies, the movie Contact, for example. Talk about what that experience was like and lending your expertise and making a movie more realistic.
Well, that was lovely because I was invited to be the consultant on the main character by Carl Sagan himself. So I was deeply honored. And I participated in what you might call a think tank session for a day with Carl and his wife, Andrian. They were producers on the movie, and the executive director, the director and the executive producer, and so on. And we discussed the script. I was given the script ahead of time. I was asked to comment on it. There were things in it I didn't like. I didn't think they were realistic. Of course, this was mostly aimed at the way the character was portrayed, And I was asked questions like, well, if this had happened to you, how would you feel? How would you react? They were trying to get the whole, they were trying to accurately describe how a woman would behave in a situation like that. Because remember, in those days, there were very few women involved. Things have vastly improved now, but in those days, we were few and far between. So it was actually a very validating experience. They very much valued what I had to say, and I was happy to see that some of the things that I had pointed out came to pass in the movie. But frankly, the movie, I think the main character really used as her guide, I think she used Carl Sagan himself. So I was supposed to spend some time with Jodie Foster, but that connection never worked out, and so they I think she ended up using Carl, which I love that movie so much. I think it is so well done.
Yeah.
And Jodie Foster was absolutely brilliant. She captured so much of what should have been on the screen.
Yeah, truly a pioneer in your field, Dr. Porco, that's for sure. What's next when you talk about space being the final frontier? Where do you see space exploration the next 50, 100 years? Is it commercial trips to Mars that people are talking about? What do you think is next?
Well, it's very dangerous to predict 50 or 100 years in the future, but I think we will still be exploring scientifically the bodies in the solar system. There's a lot left to do. We need to go back to Neptune and Uranus. Those are two planets that require orbiters around them as well, because they also we have a lot to learn there about the particular kinds of planets that they are. They're different from Jupiter and Saturn, and so they offer a new way of looking at planetary systems. And there are those of us who are very, how shall I say, obsessed with going back to a place called Enceladus, which is a tiny moon in the Saturn system, which houses an extraterrestrial ocean beneath its ice shell. And that ocean is venting into space in the form of 101 geysers, enormous, towering geysers erupting from the South Pole of Enceladus. And because that ocean is so readily accessible because of these geysers, we want to go back and sample it, and we want to test to see if this ocean has given rise to life like we believe our ocean has. So that is a main goal with in NASA,
mm-hmm.
in NASA's Planetary program, to search for those habitats that could have given rise to life, and then when you find one, to go and see did biology ever really develop there. Well, we're at that stage now with Enceladus. We'd like to go back there, and there are other moons we'd like to go back to. There's Triton in the Neptune system. Of course, we're already going back to Europa in the Jovian system. These are moons that are all suspected of having liquid water oceans under their ice shells. It's been one of those paradigm-shifting discoveries that we've made over the last 25 years that, in the early days, we always thought, well, if you were going to look for a planet that had, or a body that had life on it, you'd have to look for something identical to the Earth with liquid water on the surface. But we learned that's not the case, that you can have liquid oceans under the ice shell, and there's no reason that we know of yet why life would not have arisen in such a place. So we really want to go back to find out. So that's going to be a main thrust of exploration over the last 50 or 100 years. But as you mentioned, there are commercial outfits that are getting in the act, too.
Sure.
They are aiming mostly at space tourism, and so it maybe will work like, the airline industry worked. But because in the early days, the airplanes were used mostly for tourists, and so now commercial enterprises are going to get in the game of maybe giving people 50 years from now trips to the moon, trips to Mars, and who knows. And NASA is also focused on sending humans to Mars. So I suspect that we are going to be extending our presence over the next 50 to 100 or 200 years, extending our presence throughout the solar system, but this time bodily, not just through our robotic explorers, but sending people.
Well, very excited about the future, and of course, very excited about April 4th as well, when planetary scientist Dr. Carolyn Porco will be the featured speaker at the Liberty Science Center's IMAX Theater, Monday, April 4th, again at 6:30 as part of the New Jersey City University Presidential Speaker Series. Tickets are $25. Purchase them now at njcu.edu/lectures, and this is just a little sample of what's going to be discussed that evening, and we're so looking forward to that. Dr. Porco, thank you for your time today. You have renewed my interest in the sciences. I was not a very good science student growing up, but just hearing from you and talking to you, I have a tremendous interest again in the world around me. So I thank you so much for that, and I look forward to meeting you on April 4th.
Okay, me too.